Welcome back, everyone, to the Geometric View, episode 51, season 5. Today we're going to get into the circuit, literally try to understand how creatures on Earth complete the circuit from the sun, completing the whole circuit, the global electric, solar electric, and galactic electric circuits, measurement, scale, and the Doherty Birkeland spectrum.
I'm Buddy James, your host. Let's get into it.
Let's get into the circuit. The best way to support us is on PayPal, goldenscaling@gmail.com. Thank you. D1, season 5, and today we are getting into metric, scale, measurement, and spectrum. We will be getting into, and basically this is an introduction to Birkeland-Dougherty scaling, turning Birkeland currents into a universal scale, into living, how the individual filaments filament from the sun and become and turn into living creatures using simple geometries. Now we're going to get into quantum physics and kind of overlay it with quantum electrodynamics. So I put together this presentation. Thank you for being here, and let me just start sharing my screen. Scale, metric, measurement, and spectrum. Introduction to Birkeland-Dougherty scaling, turning Birkeland currents into a universal scaling system, or otherwise turning Birkeland currents into spectrums, a spectrum of filaments, a quantized series of systems of number and quantifiable tangibility of these actual filaments turning into Birkeland currents and turning into matter and turning into basically the idea here is the filaments themselves are a scale and a gradient, and we will be getting into that towards the end. So putting this presentation together, I realized that all of these scales were created to measure some intangible quality or quantity of something, most of the time invisible. Scales are developed to turn the intangible into something tangible. Another way to say that is that scales are developed to turn something there is no words for and turn it into something, and turn it into a measurable science. Metrics. Metrics is a method of measuring something, or the results obtained from this. We have developed or adopted scales, metrics, and measurements for nearly everything measurable. Most of the time, there's many multiple versions of these different charts, types of scales, etc. We have the music scale, we have a temperature scale, the barometric scale, logarithmic scales, and we even have a scale for the taste of how hot something is, i.e. the Schofield scale. Now, I'll go through and do examples of different scales here to get us in the mindset of scales, not necessarily how they were created and the history of how they're created, but more or less what scales, some of the scales are in scaling systems, measuring systems for different intangible and tangible things. So the decibel is a relative unit of measurement corresponding to 1/10 of a bell. It is used to express the ratio of one value of a power or root power quantity to another on a logarithmic scale. A logarithmic quantity in decibels is called a level, and it goes up by 10. Decibel, decagon, dec. An audiogram measures hearing ability. The goal of audiometric testing is to measure your hearing ability across a range of frequencies in each ear independently. This testing produces a chart called an audiogram. So here, for example, here's decibels at 0, silence, breathing and ticking watch is 10, rustling leaves and mosquitoes is 20, whispering is 30, light rain computer hum is 40, etc. Rocket launch here at 180, so yeah. Then there's a vision scale. The Snellen chart is an eye chart that can be used to measure visual acuity. Snellen charts are named after the Dutch ophthalmologist Herman Snellen, who developed the chart in 1862. Many ophthalmologists and vision scientists now use an improved chart known as the Logmar chart. Then we got the temperature scale. Scale of temperature is a methodology of calibrating the physical quantity temperature in metrology. Empirical scales measure temperature in relation to convenient and stable parameters, such as the freezing and boiling point of water. Absolute temperature is based on thermodynamic principles, using the lowest possible temperatures as a 0 point of selecting a convenient incremental unit. So here's another example of the scales. We took something as broad as temperature and turned it into as many things a temperature encompasses. You can have a cold wind, you can have a cold day, you can have like in a hot day you can still be chilly. There's so many different things, and all of these different like moist air and cold, dry, damp air is all included inside of one thing, the measurability of temperature and the scale here, and then barometric pressure, and then there's the wind chill and a bunch of other stuff. But light scale. The electromagnetic spectrum is the range of frequencies of electromagnetic radiation and the respective wavelengths and photon energies. So different size waves. The size of a wave of a human is right here, the size of a wave of a huge building, and you got the size of needles. And here's an atom down here, here's the nucleus of the atom, etc., and so on. There's the color scale. A color wheel is a circular chart that shows preliminary and secondary colors. The color wheel most commonly used today is called the HSV color wheel, which means hue saturation value. The digital form of the HSV color wheel is called the RGB color wheel. So another example of a chart and a scale of different colors and the rainbow and light. And you got the Richter scale, a numerical scale for expressing the magnitude of an earthquake on a basis of seismograph oscillations. The more destructive earthquakes typically have magnitudes between 5.5 and 8.9. The scale is logarithmic again, and a difference of 1 represents an approximate 30-fold difference in magnitude. Now, the Doherty here, we're here to show also that the Doherty set is what's unlocking this information. As I've been studying it, I find more correlations daily, and I add those correlations to these podcasts to show how it actually is a measurement, an empirical measurement scale for a universe of electromagnetic induction. So universal scaling, space-time scaling. So what are we scaling? What are we looking for? What are we going into? We're going into the ether. We're going into plasma. We're going into black holes. We're going into the 4 fundamental forces and seeing how that geometry comes, that quantum geometry comes out and iterates and unfolds naturally as there's emerges. It's an emergent geometry. It's an emergent dynamic geometry, and fetuses use the same geometry, and there's tubes and shells use the same geometry, and our ears use the same geometry. Our whole bodies are using this fractal type geometry of scaling that is exhibiting pre-atomic type of structures. So what is responsible for the scaling phenomena that we see in all of the 4 fundamental forces and reality? Is there a scale that the universe is utilizing? Is there a quantum scale or a macro scale? And do they merge into each other? Is there a scale of individual Birkeland current filaments? That's what we're going to see here later in this presentation, a scale, a numeric scale of distance and size and rotation of Birkeland currents, and there's many names and things like that that we're going to get into that are really unfamiliar with a lot of people. So, geometry of space-time. The geometry of space-time is the gravitational field. It's the same thing, says Carlo Rovelli. Inverse square scaling. In quantum mechanics, the inverse square potential is a form of a central force potential which has the unusual property of the eigenstate of the corresponding Hamiltonian operator remaining eigenstate in a scaling of all Cartesian coordinates by the same constant. So the reality is scaling using this inverse square potential, and there's these Hopf vibrations and spinors that come off naturally of this vortexture. And as this geometry is inverse square scaling, it is the magnetohydrodynamic geometry that comes from the sun and also works on a quantum level that works its way back out of the atoms and photons and electrons here on Earth. And also, this is the pattern of the sound and reverberation as the Birkeland currents wrap around and filament and hit the Earth. They are creating Whistler and Hissler waves and all of these other types of waves, and these waves themselves break up and dynamically spin using the same geometry and make this humming and whistling sound, the same type of sounds that whales and frogs and everything mimics. So it's mimicry on all scales, using this same simple repetition of this Bessel function, this ripple, over and over and over, creates reality and creates these types of parameters for reality and the existence that we see to come into existence. So this is deeply rooted here. Space-time geometry indeed uses this same inverse square potential to form the beginning building blocks of crystallization of any atomic structure. The geometry is subatomic. So what is it that is in this quantum foam, this fine structure constant? In physics, the fine structure constant, also known as Sommerfield's constant, commonly denoted by A, the Greek letter alpha, is a fundamental physical constant which quantifies the strength of the electromagnetic interaction between elementary charged particles. The fine structure constant has mystified scientists since the 1800s. The number 1 over 137 might hold the clues to the grand unified theory. Relativity, electromagnetism, and quantum mechanics are unified by the number. This inverse square law geometry makes up the first principle quantum spin foam eigenstates and eigenvectors that makes it possible for the spinors and twistors to come into existence. The space, we're studying space. The quantum foam and quantum geometry is the space. The transforms that are being done on the spin foam is the actual space, and it scaffolds and it builds and it ripples and rolls off of, and it is like very much like a scroll within a scroll, and or periscopic in nature. And there's a loop tendency and loop quantum gravity, which we're about to talk about here. Quantum spin foam and ether. How first principle geometries create long, extended chain-like filamentous structures of information. What's more is how this information is stored along axially aligned sheets. In physics, the topological structure of spin foam, or spin foam, consists of two-dimensional faces representing a configuration required by functional integration to obtain a Feynman's path integral description of quantum gravity. These structures are employed in loop quantum gravity as a version of quantum foam. The Doherty set is the quantum foam. As the spheres pinch, there's a dielectric Apollonian gaskets that are secreted outward, and that these themselves are the atomic structures. As the vortices and the layers and lenses overlap, it creates brief moments, according to quantum electrodynamics, for particles to come into existence and go out of existence. And that is inside of this Titterbueying, and these are the individual small waves inside of the larger, smaller scaffolding of waves, which Walter Russell called octaves of pressure. These octaves of pressure, spherical octaves of pressure, as they integrate and upgrade and through multiple successive magnitudes of series of magnitudes on a scale downward and inward. It's all logarithmic and it's all quarter power scaling, just as we're about to see all natural cellular, even the breath and the breathing of all animals is all related to this same scaffolding fibrous structure of how spin foam or space-time happens to unfold and unfurl using this basic geometry, this super simple geometry of the inverse square, basically inverse square scaffolding, and it is what a square within a square what creates this geometry. You repeat it over and over and over, and you start to get these tunnels and these spinors and these hop vibrations, which are basically fibers inside of particles that exist along these axially aligned currents and inside of the axially aligned currents of atomic structure. So this is the Higgs field. The Doherty set is the Higgs field. It is what space is consistent of. So the Higgs field is a field of energy that is thought to exist in every region in the universe. The field is accompanied by a fundamental particle known as the Higgs boson, which is used by the field to continuously interact with other particles, such as the electron. Here it is. So we're getting towards the number. The numerics are going to be after talking about biology next and scaling in biological systems, which is me reading an article. But first, we're going to talk about the Birkeland-Dougherty electromagnetic scaling and spectrum. It is these exact tunnels that are created that are already in here that I highlighted, that are along these this axially aligned filament, this field aligned filament, or this Gaussian Birkeland filament. So converting the electromagnetic spectrum into a Birkeland current spectrum by applying the cayley-dickson transformations across topological spacetime manifolds yields the Doherty set. The Doherty set can be constructed by using the fruit of life concept in geometry, squaring it by scale, then doubling it by rotating it 30 degrees one time. Birkeland-Dougherty cavitation coordinate system. That's what this is. Everything's cavitating, and this is a system to help us understand the weights of the atomic scale, and as they pinch and are parts of smaller and smaller arrangements of like attracts alike. Carbon atoms attract carbon atoms. Oxygen atoms attract oxygen atoms. It's all a game of like attracts like likes like. Birkeland-Dougherty cavitation coordinate system. So it's a scaling as a path to quantum gravity via the Higgs field. So if you were to say that this is an all space filling arrangement, which it is, but it's also scale symmetric, and there's a whole bunch of other symmetries that this geometry employs. It is simplex supergeometry, and it is very easily understood. It's just that we're just now getting to the point where science is starting to meet up with the art, like MC Escher, when we see these impossible worlds, but these are possible. Geometry itself is the most tangible of all arts. So you can see gears and rotating and rotations and galactic structures and black holes and all sorts of other different things inside of this geometry here. Scaling in biology. Now, if you take this idea here where bacteria and the first beginnings of bacteria in this, looking at it like this tree, this family tree, it is this filamentous-like fractal structure where it takes all of these filaments first for all of these to be integrated as a integrated information system where the whole is part of the part, and the part is part of the whole. It's a holographic gestalt type of way of looking at it, and that's how this is too. Now, individual creatures are on these filaments, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's what we're doing here. I'm trying to show that these filaments here are these individual creatures, and as the outside necessitates the inside, necessitates the outside, necessitates the inside, all of this is wrapped up inside of cores of filaments within filaments within filaments. So these life cycles of animals and seeds and plants and fungus and bacteria and fish and everything else, it all uses the sex principle and asexual principle of division and fractate and fractals. It is fractality. It's all breaking down. So this Lichtenberg-like structure here is the sun. It is the Birkeland currents coming from the sun, and they are ordered as geometry alive Van Allen belts inside of uh, continually chirping uh, uh, radio frequencies inside of Whistler mode waves, and these Whistler mode waves are reassuring these animals' existence. Now, when they stop out here in the Van Allen belts, these creatures stop and they go out of existence. And new structures, the filaments rearranged, and new structures come in to fill the void and are created. And this is extinction, and the opposite of extinction is speciation. So the speciation is all related to these filaments here. Scaffolding biological living systems into filamentous structures. Now, we already are familiar with this tree of life and DNA and how we have family trees and all of this, how it's all wrapped up inside of these biological entities, and the biological entities are Birkeland currents, and that's what the Birkeland-Dougherty idea is that they actually provide the life for the filaments, and as they become different, or as the frequencies change inside of the larger system, they scaffold down and the creatures change during catastrophic extinction events. And as the new creatures are formed, it's in the ambrosia of the memory of the creatures that are resonant with the planet at the time, that indeed thrive. And there's many different types of um, migrations of different animals that's going on at all times, at different times in the planet here. Super interesting. Like salamander migrations once a year and all this other really fun stuff. So that we don't really think about, that's part of the memory of the scaffolding of these chirps and the harmonies of the higher aurora boreal frequencies that are attached to everything. So scaling the tree of life and plunging it directly into the nectar of the sun and all of the Birkeland currents. The same scaling that is exhibited inside of Birkeland currents is observed within the scaling of cells and metabolic rates of individual creatures as well as body sizes. Also, the Doherty set. It all exhibits the same type of scaling. The scaling inside of the space-time quantum geometry of the Doherty set is what I propose sets up the scaffolding for living systems to reemerge using the same geometries as the magnetohydrodynamic geometry itself. So basically rehumming the strings of the sun, reorganizing it according to song, members, singing, distinction, class, individuals that peduncle into other different types of creatures and different types of elements of plants. I mean, it all starts to grow off of itself. That's what the universe is doing. It's like electromagnetism is seeking life and trying to create life. And as resources go extinct, so do other creatures, but so do new creatures come in. So anyway, I'll read this article here from pnas.org, PNAS, I don't know, whatever. Sounds kind of funny, but hey, it's a real good .org if you want to check it out. So there's a lot more to this article if you want to check it out. Here's the article. You can check it out yourself. The fact that metabolic rate scales as the 3/4 power of body mass in unicellular as well as multicellular organisms suggests that the same principles of biological design operate at multiple scales and multiple levels of organization. We use the framework of a general model of fractal-like distribution networks together with data on energy transformation in mammals to analyze and predict allometric scaling of aerobic metabolism over a remarkable 27 orders of magnitude in mass, encompassing 4 levels of organization: individual organisms, single cells, intact mitochondria, and enzyme molecules. We show that whereas rates of cellular metabolism in vivo scale as m1/4 culture converge to a single predicted value for all mammals regardless of size. Furthermore, a single 3/4 power allometric scaling law characterizes the basal metabolic rates of isolated mammalian cells, mitochondria, and molecules of the respiratory complex. This overlaps with and is extinguishable from the scaling relationship for unicellular organisms. This observation suggests that aerobic energy transformation at all levels of biological organization is limited by the transport of materials through hierarchical fractal-like networks with the properties specified by the model. We show how the mass of the smallest mammal can be calculated, and the observed numbers of densities of mitochondria and respiratory complexes in mammalian cells can be understood. Extending theoretical and empirical analysis of scaling to suborganismal levels potentially has important implications for cellular structure and function as well as for metabolic basis of aging. So we're getting into this to show that the scaffolding that is happening inside of the subatomic layer, inside of the quantum spin foam and the Higgs field and the Doherty set is all using this same scaling rate as all of the cells of all creatures here on Earth, as if there's a path of organization, a self-organization, or a path that they're following along these, and they are following along these scaling rates, as well as Birkeland currents. The Birkeland currents are following along these scaling rates too, and that's my main point here, is that you can connect the two. They connect like a spine connects to the brain. The cephalization of the sun connects to the planets, and so forth along the Birkeland currents and the sheaths, creating the individual bodies on the planet. There is deep connections. So in this paper, we apply the general ideas underlying the model to show how the scaling of metabolism can be extended down through all levels of organization, from the intact organism to the cell, mitochondrion, respiratory complex, and ultimately to an individual molecule of chromosome oxide and terminal enzyme of cellular respiration. Accordingly, a relatively simple variant connects complex biological spanning an astounding 27 orders of magnitude in mass from a single molecule to the largest mammal. We know of no precedent for this observation, nor any previous theory could explain it. And it looks like the Doherty set and Birkeland currents and these other ideas here can help explain this. Its universal character clearly reflects something fundamental about the general principles of biological design and function. The extension of scaling phenomena down to the molecular level offers potentially important insights into the organization of metabolic pathways within cells and organelles, as well as into how these fundamental units are integrated functionally at higher levels of organization. In addition to showing how the general principles of the network model account for these phenomena, we show how the turnover rate of the enzyme molecules of the respiratory complex propagates through the hierarchy to limit the maximum aerobic metabolic capacities of whole organisms. Furthermore, the allometric scaling of metabolism at cellular and molecular level focuses attention on processes associated with aging and mortality. So this is about aging, mortality, your breathing, and your respiratory, how it all scales along this, along with your, like I said, your metabolism. So there's so much more fractal type of integration inside of us connected to the whole universe. It's just great. And when you get into interscalar physics, it's even better. So the name of this article here is right here: Allometric Scaling of Metabolic Rates from Molecules and Mitochondria to Cells and Mammals. The origin of B equals 3/4 for both mammals and plants follows from three key properties of their branching transport systems. Now, one, networks are space-filling. Thus, for example, they must reach every cell in the organism. Two, their terminal branch units, such as capillaries in the circulatory system or mitochondria within the cells, are the same size, fractal, respectively, for all organisms or cells in the same class. And three, natural selection has acted to minimize energy expenditure in the networks. So it's a minimal energy configuration, just as the Birkeland currents are, and the geometry of the Doherty network and the Doherty set and Theodoretian roots. More generally, the universal quarter power can be derived by assuming that the number of terminal units, such as capillaries or mitochondria, in the hierarchical network is maximized when sealed, because this later argument does not invoke any specific structural design or dynamical mechanism, it can be expected to hold at all levels of biological organization. Booyah! Because this model works so well for plants and animals with macroscopic vascular systems, it is natural to speculate that similar geometric constraints affect transport processes at the cellular, organelle, and molecular levels. The observation that B equals 3/4 for unicellular, as well as multicellular organisms suggests that the distribution networks within single cells obeys the same design principles. Furthermore, measurements, and this is just all of this applies to the Doherty set, that all of this and this fractal-like structure of the cells, they obey the same scaling system in the distribution. So this is great. Furthermore, measurements of intercellular transport of metabolic substrates imply the existence of an efficient, organized network. Little is known, however, about how characteristics of transport systems constrain rates of metabolic energy transformation at the cellular, organelle, or molecular level. As we shall show, the success of extending allometric scaling models down to the molecular level raises the question of whether there is a real or virtual hierarchical transport system inside cells. Complex structures inside cells and mitochondria have been discovered recently that could be components of such a metabolic transport network. In any case, the data and their theoretical underpinnings define the problem and suggest that systems that supply cellular metabolism must have fractal-like properties. Boom. We now investigate the interdependence of metabolic processes from the whole organism down to the molecular level. For convenience and because relevant data are readily available, we develop the model in terms of mammals. However, the same principles should apply both qualitatively and quantitatively to all organisms that rely on biochemical reactions and catalysts of tricarboxylic acid cycle for aerobic metabolism and, in principle, anaerobes as well. It is natural to subdivide an organism into hierarchical levels, reflecting pathways of energy flow. At each level, the system terminates in a well-defined fundamental unit. Thus, an entire mammal can be viewed as a hierarchy of successively linked networks, beginning with a circulatory system that terminates in capillaries. Energy and materials are passed on to its cells, where other pathways transport them into mitochondria, where yet another system transports them to the molecules of the respiratory complex. In the inner mitochondrial membranes, these molecules, which are the sites of biochemical aerobic energy transduction, are the final terminal units of the entire metabolic system. Wow. As already mentioned, there now seems to be general agreement that eukaryotic organisms evolved via symbiosis and that mitochondria and chloroplasts were once free-living prokaryotes. This implies a three-stage evolution in the network that supplies aerobic metabolism of mammals and other multicellular eukaryotes. This goes back to the scaling I was showing you and how, if you want to connect it to the Birkeland currents, we're going to get into the exact numbers and we'll show that they wrap around each other in this type of cayley-dickson type of matrix. So the aerobic bacteria that were the ancestors of mitochondria possessed networks that shunted metabolites efficiently to the enzyme of the respiratory complex. When unicellular eukaryotes evolved, they were able to take advantage of the energy transforming systems of their mitochondrial symbionts. To do so, however, they had to evolve efficient networks to convey minerals and materials between cell surfaces and the mitochondria. Finally, the evolution of large, complex, multicellular organisms required the evolution of efficient circulatory and respiratory systems to convey metabolic substrates from specialized structures on the body surface to the cells. Interestingly, all these systems seem to exhibit the features of quarter-power allometric scaling predicted by our fractal-like models of biological networks. So this is really an interdisciplinary type of approach to taking science, art. It's not even really art, it's geometry, but it is art. So taking science and geometry and math and physics and astronomy and a bunch of other things and really wrapping them together to get a better understanding of this new type of electrosonic speciation, where the species are in the sound, in the FM frequencies. They're in the Birkeland currents. The creature's DNA, space DNA, is already out there, and it's inside the filamentous structures themselves as they organize and self-organize inside of the Birkeland currents. In conclusion, we have shown how a theory of allometric scaling integrates power production across all levels of biological organization, from the molecules of the respiratory complex through mitochondria to unicellular organisms and isolated cells in tissue culture, and on up to multicellular organisms. This theory, based on fractal-like distribution networks, can explain variations in metabolic rate over an amazing 27 orders of magnitude. Perhaps one of our most intriguing results is the prediction that the metabolic power of a cultured mammalian cell should be the same, independent of the mammal of origin, from shrews to whales. This result is marked in contrast to cells in vitro, or in vivo, where they are highly constrained by macroscopic transport networks that force their energy production rates to decrease as m1/4. Once the network constraint is removed, as in the culture, energy rates from cells from all mammals converge to the same predicted value as shown. A critical test of the generality of other theoretical models will be to extend it explicitly to include unicellular organisms and subcellular structures, to characterize the pathways of intercellular transport, and to identify the cellular organelles and molecular structures involved. Our results suggest that all biological transport systems that exhibit quarter-power allometric scaling must have the same three basic properties of the general model. A space-filling branching network extends throughout the whole organism, the Doherty set, and other Theodortian roots. The final branch of the network is a size invariant unit. Once again, Birkeland currents, fractal scaling, and the energy required to transport materials is minimized, a minimal energy configuration. Boom. This is how the scaffolding of Markland convection works. This is how the Brownian gas works. This is how cavitation works. This is how antigravitics works. This is literally the same geometry here that's happening and exhibited inside of the growth of species is the same geometry that is the quantum spacetime geometry of the Doherty set and Birkeland currents and Birkeland-Dougherty scale, the Birkeland-Dougherty scale that takes the energy itself and shows you from beginning to end how it becomes a creature from a beginning start point and scaffolds into individual atomic weights, and then planets, and then creatures. The scale is there. We just need to look at the information deeper. The whole spectrum and system of all things is a logarithmic phi scale invariant. It's all the golden ratio, a universal filamentary and nodal umbilical scaling geometry. Everything is included inside of not just one of these filaments. This is the first one. This is the fundamental filament, but all of them put together inside of this one system creates something amazing that none of us know yet. It's mysterious, and I can't wait to find out what the bottom of this is, how to get into it deeper. This is writing the circuit. So this is getting into the circuit. This is getting into wavelengths and optics and understanding light. And now we're going to get into the mimicry through hierarchical holographic scaling. Cayley-Dickson scaling using Doherty-Birkeland filaments. Doherty-Birkeland filament is, once again, like I said, the idea of this the Birkeland currents nesting harmonically, fractally self-similar recursions inside of itself, but breaking down in orders of magnitude that's scaled by quarter scaling and three-quarter scaling laws. So these individual fetus-looking spirals, dynamic spirals, are also explaining eons of indras, which is ages and ages of 112,000 years, cycles of 26,000 years, cycles of 2,000 years. There are cycles within cycles within cycles, explaining the vicissitudes of time through ages and eons. Literally, the sound of this produces AR, artificial reality. The sonification of the Doherty set produces reality. So to sonify certain things, it's a data set. Take this data set and sonify it. I live at pretty close range towards Ann Arbor, and there's one of the best sonification people that live there, and apparently it's one of the best, most nerdy schools that you can go to in the United States. But we need this to be sonified. Now, what you would hear is the chirping of the frogs, and you would hear the chirping of the chorus mode waves and helicon waves that I've shown in previous episodes. The sound of the northern lights. There's a geometry to it, and this is it. And this is what creates the seeds before seeds that pull up pine cones, that pull up pine trees, conifers, that pull up the beginning plants of the ginkgo biloba, the vortex structure of the leaves, and the first deciduous, the first conifer trees and plants and animals and life is this frequency wrapped up inside of itself that creates living life. It is sonobiology, sound, life out of sound. And this is just, this literally, this spiral right here, you're looking at 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And as we get into the next one, you'll see here how it's nested within the square, showing the inverse square geometry and the inverse scaling law. And what's more is there's so many more, an infinite amount of filaments to get into. And there's also a filament of 144,000 that people talk about. So yeah, there's a number for everything. And this also happens to be a hypercomplex number. A hypercomplex number in mathematics, hypercomplex numbers is a traditional term for an element of a finite dimensional unital algebra over a field of real numbers. So this is the real numbers. These are the real numbers, but these are the real numbers arranged in the cayley-dickson, putting a cayley-dickson space-time transformation over it yields this. So the study of hypercomplex numbers in the late 19th century forms the basis of modern group representation theory. Here we go again. Hypercomplex numbers that use the cayley-dickson construction seem to follow a Latin naming. Oh, and this is a question from a lady on Reddit or a forum, and she was trying to figure out what's after. He or she was trying to figure out what's after quaternions, octonions, and sidonians. Excuse me, which are right here. Quaternions is 4, octonians is 8, sidonians is 16, trigadonians, or whatever, however you pronounce that, is 32, and it goes on from there. There's an infinite amount of these cycles and systems. And these are the numbers, these are the names for them, and these names are just ridiculous. So we got to figure something out here. So she asks, basically, she's interested, or he's interested in what comes after these numbers. This Duceten quintinigugisexonians, 256 ions, which is down here. And these are orders of magnitude. So this is how Birkeland currents scale. This is how orders of magnitudes of creatures scale into and out of each other and are based off of the numbers of the creatures around them, which are the filaments of the numbers of the creatures around them. Literally, toroidal forest of the living creatures that come out of this living river of life, this stream of flowing water. And it's all the cosmic energy of plasma and ether. And this is the organization of ether. That's what this is. Organizing Birkeland currents into individual cellular automata of living creatures. So here again, what comes after octonians? The algebra immediately following the octonians is called sidonians. It retains an algebraic property called power associativity, meaning blah, 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 blah. The cayley-dickson construction can be carried ad infinitum. So each one of these filaments is infinite. That's where the eye of the storm comes from. And that's what all of this is based off of, is this. So particles do this, and the collision of particles do this, and the bubbles that form after particle collisions, everything. So at each step, producing a power associative algebra whose dimension is double that of the algebra of the preceding step. So it's constantly doubling. But during this doubling, there's a quarter power scaling. That's quaternion scaling here. And then it keeps going on and on from there. All of the algebras generated in this way over a field are quadratic. That is, each element satisfies a quadratic equation with coefficients from the field. So okay, I'll read this. In 1954, Schaefer examined the algebras generated by the cayley-dickson process over a field and showed they satisfy the flexible identity. He also proved that the derivation algebra of the cayley-dickson algebra is isomorphic to the derivation algebra of the Cayley numbers, a 14-dimensional Lie algebra over F. So here's the answer that someone came up with. After that lady asked what comes after that number, Sidonian can also, so she did the, I think the Greek and the Latin breakdown or something like that, which is awesome because it gives us more opportunity to talk about the structure that we have here, which is the double scaling structure, the scaffolding of Birkeland currents that is the Birkeland-Dougherty filaments of its own type of scale. Here's the scale. This is the scale right here. Birkeland-Dougherty filament. This is it. Birkeland-Dougherty scaling. And I have to take the name Birkeland because I want to show that I want to show where the inspiration came from and how it is all electrical and plasma and the filaments, and we are plasma, we are life, we are the spark, we are associated with this power association. Power associativity is associated with the scaling of life and the scaffolding of life. So here's the words. They're crazy. They're nuts. And that keeps going on and on and on ad infinitum, forever. Each one of these filaments is forever. That's why we get huge currents and huge mesocycles, which are vortexes within vortexes, with storms of vortexes within vortexes within vortexes. And Andy Hall, he is amazing at talking about this. So Andrew Hall with the Thunderbolts Project and Electric Universe, look up him and the Eye of the Storm and the Dragon, and you'll start to understand some more of this information here that we have to offer at the geometric view. And I mean, I'm just, it's such a blessing that there's a path carved by wonderful collegiate professors, and Donald Scott and Walt Thornhill and all the people at the Sapphire Project, and the electric view that we started from the ground up a few years ago. Just so glad to be part of this vortex, caught up in this vortex of light, and being thirsty and satisfying the thirst of life, and not needing it to come from some sort of alternative urge that you can't control. Being in control of your life, your addictions, your habits, your future, your love, so that you can love your friends, so that they can help love other people more. That's what the circuit is. That's what the circuit wants to complete itself. All things are having sex. All things are completing the circuit. It is about completing the circuit and successfully completing the circuit in a loving manner. Now, to sort of end this here, I want to show that these are the individual Theodortian roots. All we were talking about was this one right here, inverse square scaling, and this is all I normally talk about all the time because the geometry is all right there. There's so many more geometries that you get from rotating these other regular polygons and creating other fractal systems from the Bessel function, iterative Bessel functions that build the basis of reality. That's literally what we just talked about, the scaffolding of space-time, the quantum geometry, the Birkeland currents that are built up into these filamentous structures that then again magnify the light, rectify the light, reflect the light, and become the living creatures through cells and through eggs and through seeds and through germination. It's beautiful to see the light for what it is, and fully the full magnitude of how it always is seeking. The motion is always seeking stillness, and the stillness is always seeking motion inside of the system to oscillate around the outside betwixt stillness and motion. And that's what creates the double layers of these tubes that are coming off so gracefully, so beautifully, are the design of the rays of light. This is what it would be like to hop on a ray of light, like Einstein says. But this is the geometry of it, rotated around about itself. So I get super passionate about this in this episode. I'm also passionate about it. So that concludes the presentation. I hope you have more of an understanding. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comment section below here on YouTube, or any other platform that this might be streaming on. Now we're going to get into looks almost 1 hour perfectly. Look at that. At 30 seconds to spare. Boom. All right, so now we're going to get into the Facebook news portion of the show. And still tuning in. Yeah, opening up the news. All right, here's the news hour and the geometric view news. Of course, we have a river that happens to look like a dragon. Associate the two as you will. Researchers harvest energy from radio waves to power wearable devices. Now this is sweet. Method in Materials Today Physics, and this is an article from techsplore.com. According to Sheng, current energy sources for wearable health monitoring devices have their place in powering sensor devices, but each has its setback. Solar power, for example, can only harvest energy when exposed to the sun. A self-powered triboelectric device can only harvest energy when the body is in motion. We don't want to replace any of these current power sources, Sheng said. We are trying to provide additional consistent energy. The researchers developed a stretchable wideband dipole antenna system capable of wirelessly transmitting data that is collected from health monitoring sensors. The system consists of two stretchable metal antennas integrated into conductive graphene material with a metal coating. The wideband design of the system allows it to retain its frequency functions even when stretched, bent, and twisted. This system is then connected to a stretchable rectifying circuit, creating a rectified antenna, or rectenna, rectenna, capable of converting energy from electromagnetic waves into electricity. This electricity that can be used to power wireless devices or to charge energy source storage devices such as batteries or supercapacitors. Sheng says this technology is a building block for him and his team. Combining it with other novel wireless transmittable data devices will provide a critical component that will work with the team's existing sensor models. Our next step will be exploring miniaturized versions of these circuits and working on developing the stretchability of the rectifier. Rectifier. Sheng said this is a platform where we can easily combine and apply this technology with other modules that we have created in the past. It is easily extended or adapted for other applications, and we plan to explore these options. That's awesome. Okay, scientists thrilled to observe the first milliseconds of gold crystal formation. This is cool. The first milliseconds of gold crystal formation and found that it is much more complicated than previous research suggested. Rather than a single irreversible transition, the atoms come together and fall apart multiple times before stabilizing. This discovery has implications for science and manufacturing. The results were surprising. Gold atoms would come together into a crystal configuration, fall apart, and then come together again in a different configuration, repeating the process several times, fluctuating between disordered and crystalline states before stabilizing. It is not dissimilar to what Japanese scientists first observed with salt crystals. Actually, those atoms too fluctuate in semi-ordered states before coming together into a crystal. But that process was filmed at 25 frames per second. The gold atoms fluctuated much, much faster. So here's the articles if you want to read more. Sundog geometry in the Doherty set. A sundog or mock sun, formerly called a perihelion or plural perihelion in metrology, is an atmospheric object consisting and or to the right of the sun. The two sundogs often flank the sun within a 22-degree halo. The Doherty set is the master grid for the universe of electromagnetic induction. Now, this is the most clear, accurate representation of any map that I've seen that goes through and actually has the geometry laid out in a natural fashion from a simple algorithm that shows a simple pattern that underlies the whole universe. And this simple pattern is Theodortian roots, the Doherty system, and these are scalable, and these are Birkeland currents. And this is also what we see in the reflection of these sundogs. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but I have to say this stuff over and over. So here's the funnel at the top, the funnel at the top, the funnel, circle, another circle on the top, circle on the top of the funnel, a pinch right here on the side, a pinch right here on the side, with the circle inside of a circle. These geometries are the predictive analytics of the Doherty set showing the geometry of sundogs is undeniable. It's clearly undeniable the way that this geometry is laid out here. The similarities are just ridiculous. And once again, showing the Birkeland current, the larger Birkeland currents and the filaments, and also just the lensing, optical lensing, whether it's showing the actual layers of the Birkeland currents or not. There's many of them. So here's another one. Nature is inherently chiral. Perhaps what we are seeing with is the whole centering the wave. What we're feeling is our cilia whirling round about our skin, sympathizing with the whole centering the wave. What is it that we hear spiraling through our cochlea? The whole centering the wave, perhaps? What is it that we eat? Maybe it is true that we are the whole centering the wave. All of these senses, all of our senses collect logarithmically scale invariant waves. Perhaps this is because what causes the waves is logarithmically scale invariant construct itself, meaning space-time, the geometry of the analog of the field creates the form, is logarithmic, thus the form sensing the field is logarithmic itself, plugging into the circuit again. Fractals, filaments, frequencies. Look what happens when you connect the second and the 30-second toroidal node in the Doherty network. Of course, it produces a pine-coning effect, as does the rewinding of light observed in the phyllotaxis of plants and fauna. This is most likely due to the effect of Faraday rotation, producing minimal energy configurations. What happens in helicoids are created. What happens is helicoids are created, and this produces the explosive and implosive vortices. You can envision Hopf vibration traveling along these double helicoids. That will allow you to further envision the four-dimensional wave embedding that happens on many different scales, creating the projection of reality we live in. The primary wave or pilot wave is the dilation of the embedded filament within filament coil you're looking at, depicted here. All of the ingredients for information within living systems is contained within the first filament off of the source. The code is as follows, like I show here. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and the cayley-dickson scaling along the Birkeland-Dougherty filament, creating an actual system from one source to another, completing the loop. The Birkeland-Dougherty scaling is the completion of the whole cycle of the circuit, not explaining 1 or 2 or 5 or 7 different things. It's explaining all of it. Not saying that it's a grand unified theory, but it is it's similar, and not saying that it's a theory of everything, but it's similar. It has the propensity and perspective and potentiality to fulfill these understandings of what quantum gravity is. And we need to understand supposedly what quantum gravity is in order to bridge the rest of the understanding of the other sciences together. Both the azimuthal and linear points from the node to node is exactly 1.6 phi. This first dilating aperture filament off of source is most likely the dilating spherical boundary known as Bekenstein's bound. This means that all information in the entirety of the system must pass through this interchange point, and that the information is dispersed along other similar nodal points across the event horizon and other stillness nodal points interconnected across the universe. The Doherty set is the science of holes, how they open and close, the study of the throats of holes and what lives inside of them. It is all hollow, holomorphic fractality. The whole universe is hollow. It is a lenticular universe, a hollow universe, and that's what we're going with here. Each and every filament is compressible and expandable, i.e. compression and rarefaction. This is what creates the collimated cylindrical double layering observed in Birkeland current filaments. These fibrous muscle-like plasma ligaments are minimal energy configurations, aka Gaussian Bessel filaments. Here's a great image that shows the beginning of the Doherty set construction and the beginning of a Birkeland filament as I understand them, and two different constructions that you can reach the same conclusion that will supply different information, just as different shadows in light sources provide different information of the one living system, the Metatron cube. Here's the information citing this here. And this is from Geometric Models, my friend Tufan Giffen. Metatron's cube is one of the most prominent figures in sacred geometry. This figure, which consists of the cube seen in isometric projection, a hexagon divided into equilateral triangles, can be obtained by the flower of life. This flat figure can also show the other four platonic solids in addition to the cube octahedron and the stellated octahedron. However, in terms of descriptive geometry, the ability of a cube to contain all of the solids by determining their edges by simply joining the vertices or the base centers of the cube is impossible for all listed polyhedra except for the cube octahedron, tetrahedron, and the stellate octahedron. In three-dimensional geometry, it is possible to define these solids starting from a cube by duality or truncation, but not in the way it is expressed in Metatron's cube. I have represented the Metatron's cube in a trimetric projection with one of its diagonals perpendicular to the XOZ coordinate plane, a condition which gives rise to the well-known flat representation of the Metatron's cube. Sacred geometry modeling and design tools available on the website geometricmodels.com. Artist Las Lamanas.es, and this is beautiful. I can't wait to work showing, help to understand the integration of this and how it has to do with the rotations of the Doherty set and further scaffolding. Can't wait. So wonderful image there to work on and to show other people. Here is, of course, propulsion methodologies, Victor Schauberger, an electromagnetic system, which taken Hidden Nature by Alec Bartholomew, an electrogravitic system which is a sparse collection of patent information used in the design of the B-2 bomber. Hidden Nature gives a glimpse into the work of Victor Schauberger, early 20th century naturalist. The book gives examples of implosion and vacuum-driven systems, including trees, and provides insights towards harnessing these energies. The electrogravitics papers are eerily similar in some respects, seeing that Vice article about the Navy's new tech. I thought I'd post this stuff. Their inertial mass reduction sounds nearly identical to what Schauberger writes. Cool. Thought I would share this. The reason we have a brain is to predict the future. That's a quote by Ray Kurzweil. And here's the musical notes. Here's the modes. Here is CME, cosmic microwave background. Here is I forget the name of the filament of heat, but of course it'll come to me later. Here's plasmoids designed by me with opposing spiral vortices and more of those. Oh man, I wish I remember the name of that. Whatever. Here's Steve, of course. Here's a brand new, never documented before auroral anomaly was just spotted in Norway a few days ago. This was back in 2018, but we're seeing it again now. It was never there before. It's a huge space tornado, a gigantic plasma vortex that I've modeled here inside the Doherty set and shown that it's possible through toroidal dilation and azimuthal currents to wrap around such sort of systems like this. A brand new, never documented before auroral anomaly was just spotted in Norway a few days ago. This aurora has a name. Its name is Steve. This is visual evidence backing up Donald Scott's model of a force-free field-aligned current, otherwise known as a Birkeland current. The counter-rotation is evident in the helical inductive double layering twists. Donald Scott has already confirmed the model I discovered, titled the Doherty set, matches his model, but offers more clarity on the intricacies of detail predicted in his model. Predictive analytics of the Doherty set shows that this is the fine structure constant or structure of the crystalline lattice-like spacetime geometry of filamenting and noding, so often observed in nature on all scales. Anodic and cathodic oscillating chain systems describe the bootstrapping effect of the universe to be able to go within itself in self-similar identical fractal scaling networks, as shown here. That's Steve. There's the geometry. Now this is when this is working on, so this must be 3, 6. Yeah, this is 3, 6. So this is literally the second filament. This is highlighting the geometry within the second filament. It's so sexy. So sexy. Just can't wait to continue on to create all these filaments and see what actually happens in, well, it's combinatorial mathematics, but it's also a bunch of other computing and other things to see where this eventually leads inside of smart filaments. Oh, great. So yeah, we've seen this here. Why did it go out of it? That's weird. It pulled out of the news. Okay, here we got U.S. Navy has patents on tech it says will engineer the fabric of reality. Basically, this is the gist of the article of the good information, which is mirroring old information of Victor Schauberger, Walter Russell, and vortex science, and plasma and how you make plasma engines and plasmoids. The PAS effect is the idea that controlled motion of electrically charged matter via accelerated vibration and or accelerated spin, subjected to smooth yet rapid acceleration transients in order to generate extremely high energy intensity electromagnetic fields. Plasmoids, spinning the electrons. I'm not even going to the article just because I don't even need to. but if you want, you can check it out. It's actually kind of interesting. Here is Robelli's Raphael Aurelio, I think is his name. A friend of mine, his math inside of, or his geometry and math, painting cameo in the #1 movie on Netflix today on March 20th. So I don't know what the name of the movie is, but yeah, apparently it's the #1 movie. All matter is a cymatic pattern, and you can see the cymatic patterns of the Doherty set here, right here. Some of them, bam, right there. That's what I call a magnetic wavelet, or maglet. And you can see that geometry right inside here, right on there. Right here, right here, right there. You can see these are patterns on the violin and a straight steel plate. Chladni patterns create different geometries, and when the frequency changes, the planets move. When the planets move, everything changes, and we go through eons and epic cycles and life. And then you go back to that sound later, and the planet just changes and rearranges, and everything on it goes through these cycles. This geometry is literally right one of these in here. But yeah, so there's so many cymatic patterns that are naturally inherent inside of the Doherty set, and now we're back to where we were on the beginning of the news hour, or the end of the news hour last time. So here's the end of the cycle. Here's nutrients of thunder and rotating heptagon, 7-sided shape, creating a coaxial filament. This is the nature of nature, and thank you for being here, everybody. I appreciated doing the episode, so that's a good time. Everybody have a good weekend, and we will see you next week. All right, we're out.
I will never be a better person. You can never see me. I can never be inside of that tree. I can never be inside that forest. You wanna see me, but I'm not seeing you. You wanna get where I am, then you cannot you. You can't you. I don't wanna. For the most of the time, I try to divide the clouds when I drop off and you live in the world. You think of a different stuff. I've been the first, I'm giving them a nerve. Think of a different person. All around. Something of an off. It's perfect because it's just good. Nobody get it off. Legally off. Piece of the pie. If you want a piece of that, you can have a piece of the pie. I'll give you that. I'll give you that much. If you want a piece of this, I'll give you a piece of me. Legally, I'm off of your soul. If you want a piece of me, the breath of God, a piece of this, I'll give you a piece of me. Legally, I'm off of it. By the grace of God. Sometimes it's like some moves you have on the dance floor do. Real smooth, it's like the moves you have on the dance floor. Real smooth, real smooth. If you want to think you're real smooth on the dance floor, it's real smooth. I like some moves on the dance floor. Wishes to wishes that Christ be in me, Christ be in you, Christ be in all, Christ be in God, all of us be in us as God is in one in all, as one flesh is one flesh. You're real smooth out on the dance floor. dude. Real smooth out on the dance floor, dude. Real smooth out on the dance floor, dance floor.
The geometric view is a Love is Watching product. Love is Watching being. Thank you for doing that. Keep your eyeballs out. Pay attention. There's a lot going down this year. Be vigilant. Be mindful. Be insightful. Be loving. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being kind. Share the love. Spread the love. Become the love. Amen. Thank you for joining us for episode 51, Measurement, Scale, and Spectrums. I hope we all understand how there's larger spectrums and ways of measuring things that we have not even really begun to even explore. So I implore us all to get into this math, and please become the circuit, become love, become what it is. Love is watching. I implore us all. Thank you for being here. Alright, we'll see you next week. Season 5. 52, episode 52. Buddy James signing off.
Through the grimiest, through the grittiest of life, I'm there. Through the grimiest and the grittiest of life, I'm there. Through the grimiest and the grittiest of life, I'm there. Hold up. Through the grimiest and the grittiest of life, I'm there. Life and death. All of us. We have hope. Live your life for the cause. Love life. Live it to the fullest. Life is eternal, hope and thirsty. 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 Eyes all over the wall, eyes all over your body. Can I just see straight through with transparent golden scaling? The largest of the atom, let's embark on this because this is the journey. The journey is life. Take hold. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Join us in the fight for Christ, in the fight to save lives. Surprise, submersible, so fast, the first, the last of baptism, need to say more. Pay attention like the marrow in your bones, zero in your back, air in your lungs, zero into the back, tertiary cushion neuron, synapses and narrow entrance into eternity. I'm a courier, a charismatic attitude, modern meters even meter, it might even be fun. Cider indeed, need nerds, you need nerds, need a virtue, need to be a reason. Feasibility to be a reason to be clean and sober, keys, open doors, signs of directions. Be the carrier of candlesticks, the man that brought you change. Every second you ride, to make the ribbon, you pivot, potential, you curve and cat. Could be cold, could be copycat, could be copy corpse, could be Schrodinger's best. Could be micro actor, Mackie normal, open-minded, itsy bitsy, freaking huge, a universal supermassive aspect of attached awareness. Aware of this all?
Collaborative consumption.
Are you aware of this all?
Collaborative consumption. The new thing consumption. Collaborative consumption. Consumption.
Get up now! Out of the boat! Drop! Where did it up? We don't got about the girl, but about it, not about a goddess spirit. Get up, what's up? Untitled Chapter. Little books up. I'm in search of, I'm in earth love, I'm in living life, I'm in living color, I'm an air drop, I'm an earth thing, I'm an earth thing, I'm an earth thing, I'm an earth thing.